Well, thank you very much, Ray. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk this morning not about the stuff that I usually talk about, which, just pressing the slides there, just correcting. Have we got control there, everyone? Hello, that's me, everyone. Sorry about that technical hitch there. I'm not going to talk today about the stuff I normally talk about, which is understanding human behavior better by applying some of the insights from contemporary behavioral and cognitive science. You probably will have heard me talk about this stuff before. You might have read some of the articles I've written, or heard the speeches I've made. You might have read the books I've heard, and more recently I have What She's Having. And this time last year I shared some of the insight from I'll Have What She's Having, and in particular this very simple map of human behavior, which is driven by data patterns. Now, I'm not going to talk about that stuff today, and there's a lot of really good stuff about what I call the armament side, the arms race side of market research. We tend to think that the advances in market research will come from us doing our job as researchers better. In other words, developing better methodologies based on insights or new technology or some analytic frame or other. And I think there's a lot of that stuff going on, which is all very good. But there is something that I've been thinking about in the work that I've been doing with a number of client organizations. And it seems to touch this question that ever since I've been in the industry, the wise old heads have been complaining about, which is this: we don't seem to have quite the traction in the C-suite at the boardroom table as we'd like. It seems unfair, and it seems that we should, because we have all kinds of really good stuff to offer the decision makers in organizations. To begin to answer, I've got some thoughts about what might be the case, and you may be doing some of this stuff already. You may already start to think about yourself and the services you provide in this particular way. But if so, it might reinforce the direction you're traveling in. But if not, it might open up some opportunities for you. And I think I'd like to start explaining what this idea is by referring to this great marketing guru, Teddy Levitt, who asked this very simple question: what business are you in? And he used, if you remember that article, I'm sure many people will have read it, he used the example of the railroads, and I've put the full quote here from that piece here. He described the railroads in the US, this is, because clearly in Europe and in parts of Asia, the railroads are still very strong and an essential part of our transport infrastructure, but in the US, less so. So the railroads did not stop growing because the need for passenger, the market, shrank in some way, but fundamentally because they let other people define what the market was all about, and defined the market only in terms of the railroad as opposed to the broader needs that the new competitors were dealing with. They were, as he puts it, product orientated as opposed to customer orientated. And whilst in trying to answer this question about why aren't we at the what could we do to overcome this problem of not being at the boardroom table, not having a seat there? We've tried to define market research in a number of different ways, and there's no let's be clear, there's no unique right answer here, and different people take different perspectives, and rightly so. But we've talked about things like being the kings of measurement and trying to put our arms around the whole analytics piece. We've talked about insight and aligning ourselves with creating insight in particular. We've talked about being in the advice business, and I know many market researchers that I've worked with and respect greatly have thought of themselves increasingly as consultants, advisors in that sense, to decision makers. And of course the MRS in the UK has nailed its flags squarely to the idea of evidence in business is what market research really provides centrally, and that's these are all good suggestions, but I think they're missing something important. I think they're missing the fact that we are a content provider for decision makers, and understanding ourselves as content businesses, I think starts to change some of the basic practices of what we do. And I'll just explore that for the next few minutes and see what you think. The first thing to say, though, is look, decision makers have all kinds of information that they consume regularly, which can impact on the decisions that they make, and as such directly competes with the work that we do. From the obvious business school stuff like McKinsey and HBR, to the more general business media like The Economist and the FT and so on. Increasingly also there are, explosion of not just print or online print content like that, but video content in short and long forms from TED, from the RSA. Of course, I forgot to mention the lovely people at WARC, the World Advertising Research Centre, who do so much good work in collating and facilitating conversation around the industry. But then there are other things that seem to be more left field. So there's a couple of cartoonists there who really work very hard to get their work used by business and put between serious business decision makers and into the business environment. So that's my friend Hugh McLeod at Gaping Void, and Greg Gilbert stuff, of course, as well. And then there are writers, bloggers, thinkers, people like Seth Godin's huge reach, much bigger reach than most research organisations, and into very senior positions. Equally, Malcolm Gladwell's work, or our very own Rory Sutherland, God bless him. So these are all content providers that we compete against in the boardroom to grab attention. And just because we've got the PowerPoint slides on the screen doesn't mean that our content is the only thing. Now, this is not a new idea, and I found this fabulous paper back in a decade ago from the Market Research Society, which makes this point I'm trying to make very clearly, which is no matter what we do in the market researching bit of market research, no matter what we do in the analytic piece of market research, we still have to communicate much better than we might have put emphasis on. And the context, as I've just described, with all those different competitors, is fundamentally different, both in number of competitors, type of content, and channels in which. So I've dragged up from the conversations and work I've been doing with businesses who are embracing this idea of being a media business, a content business, if you like, in addition to whatever else they might be doing. And here are just four simple things. There will be other things, but four simple things that we might do to do more of that they do as content businesses. And the first thing is making things easy. Really making the content easy to consume, as easy as possible. It may be very complicated. It may take a great deal of skill and analytic brilliance to produce the outcomes that we share with clients, but we should make it as easy as possible to consume. The old idea of the elevator pitch seems to me to be a really good way of thinking about this, and the great hunger for this stuff, for me, is indicated by the enormous explosive growth of things like this infographic. Lots of information. It's a simple briefing note for the guy you meet in the elevator. That's it. Do we always present our findings in that way, in a compelling and simple, easy to use way? I'm not sure we do. I'm not saying infographics are the answer, and as many of you know, infographics have been around for a very long time. This is the work based on the work by Florence Nightingale, famous infographic, which is widely touted from the Crimean War in the 19th century. And just to read it, it is about the deaths of British military personnel in two time periods. I believe that the black, if I'm right on this, the black squares there are, black cheese parts are deaths from wounds, and pink other, and then the blue is from illnesses on the battlefield. And the point about this chart was to demonstrate the basic thesis that Nightingale and her nursing compadres were trying to make to the authorities, that it wasn't so much battlefield injury that caused huge loss of life in the Crimean War, but the poor general health and hygiene of the military. And this led to a number of innovations in that space. Anyway, look, so that's a famous one. We see it all the time, and I didn't today want to, and we could, I think, spend almost every session talking about the learnings from election 2012. But for me, the real winner, and not just in market research terms of election 2012, was this guy, Nate Silver, whose his fantastic blog 538 I followed throughout the process, and whose book is excellent and really worth reading for all of us, and to recommend to our clients as well, indeed. But here's the thing that he does here to make it easy. Most of us, when we use traditional polling or any other related method to predict an outcome, will give people the score. What is the percentage of people saying they will vote for, or our prediction of how many people will vote for, or how many votes that person will get, or what share of the electoral college that person will get. Silver takes a very different approach in his top-line debriefing, which is to say, what's the likelihood of outcome A versus outcome B? What's the likelihood? And this makes it just so much easier to read. So whilst in the battleground states, it turned out to be fairly decisive, it wasn't clear from the national polls. And the very, whatever you think about the methodology and the accuracy of the national polls is neither here nor there. Silver made it really clear by focusing on what the likely outcome was, not the predicted, but how likely is A and how likely is B, and to monitor that. Really, really simple. So that's an easy thing. That's the first point. The second point here is making things relevant. Now, you may be surprised to learn that this was one of the world's top 3 infographics in the year 2011. And you may wonder what this might be doing in an MR conversation. Well, it's simply that this is popular because, partly, it's got to say, because it's relevant to the audience. It provides very useful and appropriate stuff around stuff that people are generally interested in. And I'm not sure that we are always able to step out of our market research agenda and talk to the issues in the language of the people we need to speak to. There's a fantastic story about Sierra Club, the conservation movement in California, trying to engage the megachurch movement, recognizing the importance in the US of Rick Warren's megachurch community in shaping popular opinion. And by listening really carefully to the megachurch folk, they found a way of translating conservation, which is the Sierra Club and the ecological movements language in particular, into a biblically rooted idea of stewardship. Now, whatever you think about these issues, that's the kind of thing we need to start to do, to translate our stuff into their stuff. And here's something that I recommended a paper about quite a long time ago. This is lifted directly from the American mathematician John Allen Powless's book, How a Mathematician Played the Market. And he talks about calculating expected values for our predictions. Now, this is something that may not make sense to most of us, but if you've had any financial training, this is what people do in financial lines of business. And to be honest, most of the people sitting in the C-suite are financially trained rather than production or marketing trained. So we need to start talking this language. And just very quickly to explain this, he says, look, imagine you have a choice between parking on the street or parking in a car park. You know that the likelihood that the price of the car park is $10 if you stay for less than an hour, but you have to, if you go over that, then that's fine. But if $14 if you stay for more than that time. He knows what the probability of you, in your own experience, is 75% of the time you stay less than 60 minutes, so you might as well go for the $10. But 25% of the time you stay more than 60 minutes. Compare that with, for example, just taking a chance on the street, and you know that 75% of the time you don't get that. And I'm sure you can work this through. Point being is that this is articulating our findings, our predicted outcomes, in terms that the business will understand. And that seems to me to be a really important step going forward. Now, the next two things I think are linked together, making the content available in many more forms and much more widely and appropriately than previously, and then providing forms and encouraging people to spread our content. And the reason why these two are together is that it's quite clear that content tends to spread, not just online, but in the broader world as well, through social means. Now, these two charts here are I've nicked entirely from an analysis done at visually.com of some of the top infographics in the world. And the same pattern is seen in any online publisher, whether you are The Economist or whatever. The most popular articles are ones which are spread through social media. And you see the same patterns here, this long tail distribution, which those of you who've read I'll Have What She's Having know the importance of there. That's a signature for social. So if we want to spread our content, we have to get that social thing working. And part of that is moving away, giving ourselves a chance to be lucky by moving away from the focus on PowerPoint and the debrief and the report, and providing other ways of making our information and our insight and our learning available to people. And so the question to all of us is, so in what different ways do you plan when you start a project to create content for both long and short form? Sometimes, I know you're doing a piece of qualitative, interesting video ethnography, you want to create a short film to bring things alive, to share, or a verbal version of the debrief. We allow sometimes that debriefs to be recorded, or etc. etc. You know, I've got a number of different media platforms here, including that good old standby of the elevator pitch, but also coffee. And by that I mean, what are you giving people? What's the heart of what the output that you're sharing with them that they will share with each other over coffee? Are you creating content in such a form that allows them to do that, that allows them to text to each other, that allows them to email to each other, that allows them to share the central findings on that one slide? I remember being taught by my old boss many years ago, Paul Felbeck, to do the one slide. What's the one slide that really, really matters? Nowadays, we have to say not just the one slide, but the one image, the one JPEG that you want people to share. This also means, because of the importance of social, that we need to start thinking more appropriately about creating content itself, not just the platforms, content itself for the space between decision makers. Between decision makers. What kind of content goes between them is something that I would ask as a marketing and comms person. What kind of content goes? What do they share with each other? What do they refer to? What bits shape their conversations? What other things? And let's learn from those and emulate them. Here's a great one, which is I don't know if those of you interested in behavioural economics, I'm sure will come across the landmark Mindspace report for the UK Cabinet Office, done by the Institute for Government. And it's a review of the key insights, the 8 to 9 big insights for policymakers to be derived from behavioural economics. And it's an excellent report. And the summary, I think, is something like 20, 30 pages long. They're really good, really detailed, really practical. However, it's this thing that seems to be spread far and wide, which is a one-page version of the whole show. How often do we provide our content in that kind of form? Or indeed, and concentration here, I think, is something that's worth thinking about in this kind of form. That's why, this kind of map, which Professor Alex Bentley and I invented in response to a client brief back in 2007, and you'll remember it from last year and from that book. Just really, really simple. So where is our business? This is the big insight. Where is our business and what are the implications of that? All on one page. So that's something that I do. But then there's this kind of stuff, which is, and this is another cartoonist. This is Tom Fishburne, an American guy who used to be CMO at Method, the eco-cleaning business. And he's just fantastic at encapsulating a really big marketing idea or insight into people. And this is one that he did in response to hearing me talk about I'll Have What She's Having and the importance of social influence compared to all of the activities that brands and marketers try and worry about. Anyway, so there's that. Or even my good friend Hugh MacLeod, Gaping Void, did this one. So the question then, it may not add anything to your particular view of the world, but I hope it does open up some new ways of thinking about the practice of market research, not the practice of collecting data, analyzing data, interpreting data, but the practice of helping the users of our data make use of it, and to think of ourselves as content businesses in addition to all that other stuff seems to me to be quite a useful and rich space to look. Thank you very much.